Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Corey Kaufman, coming to you live once again via Zoom and being socially distant as recommended.
Today, we're going to learn about a non-profit corporation called York Operation Lifesaver that promotes public safety education with the purpose of ending collisions, deaths, and injuries at highway, rail grade crossings, and along railroad rights-of-way.
That's right, Corey. Let's learn more by welcoming our guest, Phil Merens, the New York State Coordinator for York Operation Lifesaver. Phil, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHBC.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the chance to discuss Operation Lifesaver and the work we do. Operation Lifesaver is a volunteer organization. Last year, our volunteers did 600 presentations and events across New York State, and we reached about 60,000 people. And we know that the best way to teach people about train safety is to basically get in front of them, give them the information so that they can make better choices at grade crossings and avoid things like trespassing on railroad tracks, which is highly dangerous and it leads to over 1,000 collisions between trains and people every year. And if you know anything about a train and how huge it is, if it collides with a person, the person really doesn't stand a chance. So we're really all about saving lives.
I would agree. In a match with a train, I don't stand a chance. I'll agree with you there. But Phil, before we get into those details, first of all, during this pandemic, personally, how has it affected you and your operation?
We've been severely affected. Again, we did 600 events out throughout New York State in 2019. We were on pace to eclipse that in 2020 when we had to shut down everything. We haven't had more than 2 presentations since middle of March. Everything's been shut down, and our board has really just issued a statement that until further notice, we can't do any more in-person presentations. So we're going to go to Zoom and videos, but they're not as good as getting somebody in the room, especially because a lot of our volunteers are ex-railroad, ex-law, or ex-or law enforcement, and they bring a perspective, having seen the results of collisions. They really bring a great perspective, and kids and adults really respond to that. Because, it's one thing for me to tell you, I don't come from the train industry, but when somebody who has like an engineer who, some of them have had 15 to 20 collisions, and there's nothing they can do. Once they, put on an emergency brake on that train, they have to wait for the train to stop, just like the person in the car or the truck that's on the track. So my best volunteers are those engineers, those law enforcement people that deal with these collisions, because they see the results of them, and they just want to give the public information so that they don't make bad decisions. It's really,
we're going to lose. As you said, in a meeting with a train, we're not going to be the winning team. Corey?
So I understand that you have quite the background working with nonprofit organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. In 1990, I was working for a statewide organization, and they liked my work ethic, so they took a chance on me as a bookkeeper, which I knew nothing about. In fact, I had never even reconciled my own checkbook at the time. And I taught myself accounting, became their CFO within a year and a half, and I've been in nonprofit management since 1991, either as an employee or through my company. So I have worked for political groups, for environmental groups, for unions, a whole range of advocacy groups, social justice groups. So I have a wide range of experience in the field, a lot of grants that I've written, that sort of thing. So.
Now, Phil, can you tell us more about Operation Lifesaver and the mission to New York State?
Sure. Operation Lifesaver began in 1972 when there were 12,000 collisions between trains and people every year. The governor of Idaho was just taken aback by how many people in his state were dying at railroad crossings, and he wanted to do something about it. So he came up with the program Operation Lifesaver, working with the local railroad that was out there. And in 1 year, they cut the collision rate by 50%. So that made people take notice that within, I think, 5-6 years, there was a national organization. New York State started in 1986 when there was something like 9,000 collisions a year. And over the space of about 50 years, working with the federal government and railroads and state agencies, Operation Lifesaver and our coalition has brought that 12,000 collisions down to around 2,100 to 2,500 a year. Now, that's still a lot. That's still too many. But it shows that education, getting out to the public, giving the public the tools they need to make the right decisions and not to do things like try to get past the train at an at-grade crossing or going around down gates or not waiting for a gate to come up at a crossing when there's two tracks and there might be a train coming on the other track that you don't see. All those things, when public knows about it, they make better decisions, and better decisions lead to them staying alive. So it's a really great success story. Public education combined with enforcement and engineering improvements, putting gates up at more and more crossings throughout.
And on behalf of all those people from number 2,501 to 12,000, we thank you because we're all around here today because of the hard work of your organization and your own hard work. So it's greatly appreciated. Corey?
Why is Operation Lifesaver targeting trespassing in New York this year?
So in 2019, there was 1,122 trespass collisions in the United States, leading to around 650 deaths. New York State was in the top 10. We were ninth on the list for trespass collisions and fatalities. That's never a top 10 list you want to make. Now, we know that most trespassers are young males, 15 to 40, and we also knew that there was no real outreach to an urban young audience to try and give them, again, the education and to make better decisions. Because it's really all about giving people information. It seems a lot of people will look at, let's say, a path that's leading to a railroad that has been there for a long time, and they know that people have used that path and done a shortcut across the railroad to get to something on the other side of the tracks, and they'll think, well, it's perfectly safe. But it's really putting yourself at great risk. Trains are really fast, really big, and it's hard to judge how fast they're traveling. And they're much quieter than people think. People think that you're going to hear a train from a long distance. You're not. Trains are much quieter than they used to be because of improvements in tracks, improvements in the trains. So, that's why up in New York, right near where I live, last year, a senior in high school who had his whole life ahead of him was just walking along the tracks and got hit by a train because he had his earbuds in and never heard the train coming, never felt it. What we want to do is give young men and young people in general the idea that, their life is too important to risk by trespassing on the tracks.
So, Phil, is it just carelessness by people daring, let's see who will walk closest to the train, or what's your experience show?
What we found is that 75% of trespass fatalities occur within a quarter mile of an at-grade crossing where people could have crossed safely. So what this tells us is that people are prioritizing convenience over safety, which is not the right thing to do. So what most people, when people trespass, they're doing it to cross over the tracks, as I said, to get to someplace on the other side, to perhaps play along the rail yards, Often enough, people think that the railroad tracks are a convenient shortcut to get to somewhere else, so they'll walk along the tracks, which is incredibly dangerous. And, people will even do things like ride their bikes on the railroad tracks, which is incredibly dangerous. The train is coming, you could get caught on the railroad tracks fairly easily. And if you fall and a train's coming, you may not have the time to get out of the way. So really there's many reasons why people do it, but the two biggest really are to do a cut through or to go for a walk, or ride their bike on the railroad tracks. And those are the kinds of things that when people know how dangerous they are, they will hopefully think twice about it. I got to say, I will never walk along the railroad track. I'll never be within 10 or 15 feet of a railroad track when a train is coming, because trains, they overhang a railroad track 3 to 4 feet. And often enough, if train has been traveling some distance, a strap or something could come loose. And a train traveling 55 miles an hour with a strap coming loose and you're within 10 feet of the tracks, you're in a big danger zone, because people have, gotten killed just because something was loose on the train and they were too close to the tracks. So if you're on the tracks, I always stay 20 to 25 feet back, especially now, having learned what I learned in this job.
You are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Corey Kaufman, along with Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Phil Merens, the New York State Coordinator for New York Operation Lifesaver, a nonprofit corporation that promotes public safety education with the purpose of ending collisions, deaths, and injuries at highway, rail grade crossings, and along railroad rights of way. Are you working with the Long Island Railroad to help combat this problem?
Yes, this campaign our trespass campaign would not have been possible without the great help of the MTA, Long Island Railroad, because I don't know where the trespass corridors, the high trespass incidences are, the railroads do. So I had railroad personnel walking along, going to the tracks and getting me the geolocations for the hotspots that we could use for our current campaign. Because what we're doing is we're using geofencing techniques at trespass hotspots, maybe a mile long on the track, some of them. So when people enter that area, they're going to get an ad sent to their phone. They're going to get pre-rolls on videos that they might watch with our trespass and anti-trespass information. It's a really exciting campaign because we're also going to have print up in the MTA stations eventually, and so we're really hopeful that this will reach people in the communities that are close to these trespass locations, and more importantly, reach people when they're trespassing, because we all know that almost everybody these days carries a cell phone. People are on their cell phones a lot, and this is a way to reach them when they're actually involved with trespassing. So the ideal would be that somebody gets into one of these trespass locations, they're on their phone, and they see a message from us about how dangerous it is to trespass, and so they can think about what they're doing, and hopefully they will think about our tagline: "Trains belong on tracks, you don't." So it sums it all up for us. So it's a pretty exciting campaign, and without the help of the MTA, the LIRR, and the Metro North personnel, we would never have been able to do this. So I'm really happy that they work with us, and they're part of our coalition. We have a coalition of railroads throughout the state, regulators from New York State and the federal government. So when we have a board meeting, we have representatives of the entire train industry and the regulatory industry, and it's a really, really great coalition. Not every state has a Operation Lifesaver with this kind of coalition, and that's why we have such great volunteers. That's why we have reached a lot of people. Not every state has the record of New York State.
Phil, I think that's a great idea with the cell phones. And of course, everybody having them, it alerts them. And just as if we pass a certain store and they tell us come in for 10% off or whatever. If someone is hearing about this, do you accept volunteers to work on this project? And if so, who is your typical? Is it a former railroad employee? Is it a teacher because they would be good in front of a group? Is it someone with police enforcement?
That's a great question. Our volunteers typically come from either the railroad industry or from law enforcement, because both of these groups have seen the effects of collisions and they want to really get the word out to try and save lives. As one of my volunteers said to me early on when I first started this job, you never know, and when I'm teaching somebody who's going to save their life, that's why I do it. It's unusual to volunteer in an organization where what you can do will actually save somebody's life. So it's a very, people get a lot out of it. We love volunteers. Obviously, right now we're a little stymied with doing presentations, but we're hoping that by early 2021 we'll be back and doing that. But if people are interested in volunteering, they can go to our national organization website, www.oli.org. That's oli.org. And there's information on train safety and on volunteering. They can also go to our website, just Google us up, New York Operation Lifesaver. And we also have links to volunteering from there.
That's great. And we'll ask you for that information before the end of the show again. If someone wants to volunteer, if they didn't get it, they can jot it down at that time. Corey?
I understand you offer a grade crossing collision investigation course. Who would be registering for that course, and what would someone learn by taking it?
So that's a course really dedicated for railroad employees and law enforcement employees who would be investigating collisions. It would give them the tools to understand how the collision happened and what the most likely cause of the collision is. So most of those people would be law enforcement. I've had some people request to take that course who had general interest, but mostly it's for law enforcement and for trained personnel. And what we're trying to teach them is how to see the clues of what would have occurred.
Phil, I understand there's also a rail safety for emergency responders course. Now, what's that all about? What would someone learn if they took that, and how does that help the emergency responder?
When an emergency responder takes off in their vehicle, let's say an ambulance or a police car, they're so totally focused on their job. These are people who are actually saving lives, and they want to get to do their job. And you can Google it up. There are multiple instances of first responders coming to a railroad crossing and either not waiting for the gates to get completely up or just trying to beat the train. And so these are courses designed to show them you can't really save a life if you're dead at first.
That's a good rule. I like that.
It's unfortunate. And that, here's the safety information you need to have. Again, these things are they're usually very straightforward. If there's often enough that you come to a railroad crossing, there are two tracks. You see the train on the nearer track, it's going one way, and the railroad, when it's done, the gates haven't come up. You don't often see the train coming from the other direction, and that's several times police, fire, and rescue vehicles have gotten hit because they have been impatient. So if you can boil it down, again, for first responders, what we're really saying to them is be patient at train crossings. You can't do your job if you get in a collision, and here's the tools to recognize when you're putting yourself in danger.
Oh, I thought it was something totally different. That's a great point, because they're rushing to an emergency and they can make the same mistake the average citizen could do without this and not realizing their approximate cause of more problems.
And they do. Unfortunately, I've seen way too many videos of train collisions, and I can tell you that Police, fire, and ambulance have all been involved in train collisions, not because they're being,
Careless, I guess.
careless. They are being careless, but they're really trying to save somebody's life. And they just need to know that they got to save their own first.
You are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Corey Kaufman, along with Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Phil Merens, the New York State Coordinator for New York Operation Lifesaver, a nonprofit corporation that promotes public safety education with the purpose of ending collisions, deaths, and injuries at highway, rail grade crossings, and along railroad rights of way. So tell us about these special trains I learned about on your website called safety trains. Can anybody ride these?
A lot of the railroads, because they are our best partners, the railroads know that information is the only way that people are going to not do things at grade crossings and around railroad tracks. So they run, they have events like safety trains throughout the year, especially back in the pre-COVID days. And, these are the kind of things that, again, are the way that we reach the public, and the way that we reach, I think, the most critical part of the public is you reach a kid, you give them the information, perhaps scare them a little, but give them the information about staying safe, and that stays with a young person for a long time. And it gives them, it's how my generation learned to accept wearing seatbelts, where my father thought they were just why. But we knew that you wear a seatbelt to stay alive. And, I finally convinced my dad to wear a seatbelt, and a month later he got in an accident where he would have been seriously injured without the seatbelt. So it's the same rule that applies to trains. I think the most critical audience is young people, because they are not just the future, but they really affect how adults think. And, kids, if you have a kid, they are not shy about telling you that they know something better than you. And in this case, if they know something more about safety around trains and they're making their parents be more safe, that's a great thing.
It's almost like you're deputizing people to work for you and spread the word.
We are, actually. That is when we reach the young children, that is pretty much, our goal, because they're not driving. We definitely don't want them to walk along the tracks, but they're mostly in danger when they're in a car. 95% of the collisions that occurred are in cars or pedestrians walking along the railroad track. So, if we can make a young person tell their parent to slow down and not try and beat a train at a crossing, we've done our job.
Now, Phil, you have a public safety campaign going on now. Hashtag Stay Patient, Stay Alive. Can you tell us about this message?
Sure. We did that in conjunction with International Level Grade Crossing Day. You can tell that that's a British invention, because, that's not a label that we would use. But we did that downstate primarily. It was a great campaign, I think. We had about 4 million impressions, I believe, throughout the state, mostly, of course, downstate. But it was really to get people to think again. Stay patient at a railroad crossing. Don't try to beat the train. Don't go around the down gate. That's the way you stay alive. And right now we actually have 3 campaigns running. One is an at-grade campaign that is using geofence techniques to notify people at the 15 worst at-grade crossings in New York State, the ones that are most likely to have an incident throughout the year. So they're getting, it's the same thing as our trespass campaign, the same idea. When they're in that location and they're on their cell phone, they will get a banner ad or a pre-roll letting them know about the shoes of train safety. Now, it's not going to be, if you're in your car, and hopefully you're not using your cell phone, but when you get out of your car and use a cell phone, you will see those images. So that's a really good campaign. And we have another one that's devoted to teaching truck drivers and the general public, but we're focusing on truck drivers, about the emergency notification sign. You probably have not noticed these, but at every railroad crossing, there is a blue and white sign, sort of like a license plate for the railroad crossing. It gives the crossing, the federal crossing number, and the number of the railroad that you should call. And if your vehicle is stuck on the tracks, you call that number and they can stop the train before it hits your car. So it's a really important thing. Most people don't know about it, and we're really excited about that campaign also. So we have those two campaigns and the trespass campaign going for the next 2 to 3 months.
It sounds like you're doing everything you can on your end, so now it's just up to the rest of us to stay alert for these signs and be ready to receive them. Corey?
Now, I know you aren't here to represent the Long Island Railroad, but can you tell us about what you know about how they are and other rail systems in New York have responded to the COVID crisis? What are they doing differently now than before the pandemic?
Everybody is trying to get as many presentations online as they can because we can't reach people in person. But we can give teachers and educators the tools to do a video presentation to, either by Zoom or however, so that they can at least get the information out. And I'm really proud that Metro North and Long Island Railroad, they both have a tracks campaign. And Metro North has a safety superhero called the Trackman that apparently is very popular in schools. And both of them are really trying to figure out how to get the message out in the era of COVID when they can't, be at the schools, do the in-person presentation they used to do. And Long Island Railroad does a huge amount of presentations, as does Metro North. So I'm really happy to be partnered with them. When I say that we've reached 60,000 people, I'm not even including all the people that Metro North and the Long Island Railroad reach. So we really reach a lot of people per year with our safety message.
Phil, before we wrap up, give us that website once again.
It's www.oli.org.
Beautiful. We want to thank our guest, Phil Merens, the New York State Coordinator for New York Operation Lifesaver. Phil, good luck to you and to your organization.
Thank you for having me, and stay safe around the railroads, everyone.
I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Corey Kaufman. Thanks for listening to this week's special edition of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to whpc@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.